Hey guys, welcome to another session of Epic 7. This is my initial thoughts video for designer Lilibet or ML Lilibet. I have much to say about her. I think that from a hero design perspective, I don't really like the tug of war that Epic 7 has kind of like imposed on us. I know this is a gacha game. I know that this is inevitable. We've seen this many times. This hero is released because it counters this hero, and then vice versa, back and forth. It feels like the past while, like for a couple months now, not only did Epic 7 release control comps or crowd control heroes, they not only released them, made new ones, and then they also gave them developer buffs, dev buffs to make them better, and then the limited also controllers, like Cerise, Fairy Tail Tenebria, all that stuff, and then boom, they boom. All of a sudden, here we go. Like we were always, you know, for every hero release, I was like, okay, are they done with the control yet? Are they done with the control yet? Are they done with the control yet? Finally, they are done with the control for now, as one deterrent against control. Although it's necessary, it is very artificial, you know, because I mean now everybody wants her. Because she can deal with control. Everybody's been building up Kitty Clarissa, Ray, all the cleanses you name it, anything to deal with crowd control, predominantly for RTA, but it does cascade down into, I think, just like, you know, arena defense, guild war defense, and stuff like that. Crowd control has been pretty big monster during season 3, Ardor season, for all aspects of PvP. So now that season 3 is closing, we get this hero. This is, it could be a hint of what's coming. Maybe there's going to be another one, but usually, generally, like the thing about people who could deal with debuffs is you don't need many to deal with them. Whereas you can have a ton of controllers and it's really cool, but you know, one Ray, a really well built one, will deal with almost all of the debuffers in the game, you know what I mean? So like designer Lilibet in that case, yeah, she's a well-designed hero, but when I saw it, I was, you know, I wasn't too spectacularly excited for it, just because I just saw like the underlying motive. So that's as far as I will complain about it. Apologies if that was, you know, sounds salty and it kind of like, you know, rains on the parade. This is an ML hero after all, so it's going to be very influential, and if she isn't used a lot and Smilegate detects it, they will give her a dev buff. That being said, all of the ML heroes that have gotten dev buff and buffs, plural, have more or less proven to be better and better every time. I'm talking about like Specimen Says has now gone 2 revisions. His latest one definitely makes him more interesting. Although not meta, but you know, sometimes a snap of a finger, like Ambitious Tywin, Briar Witch Assyria, one dev buff makes them like absolutely a must-have hero. Designer Lilibet may see that, depends on how she performs, but I think, you know, with what she's got, I think she's solid. So, you know, with my personal gripe aside from this kind of like, you know, meta manipulation, I think that she's actually good. So let's talk about her. So Dark Warrior Cancer, it is a Lencia star sign. I've seen all day people have been trying to build, you know, with their gear, what kind of Lilibet or ML Lilibet that they could build. Thinking like, you know, maybe she could build as a DPS, like kind of like an F Maya. 180 speed, if you get her to 180 speed, if she gets her CR boost, which is 40%, she'll be able to cut a 300 speed hero. Which is pretty amazing if you think about that. That will open up some really interesting build options. Her Imprint release is health, which is very beneficial if you want her to be more supportery. I mean, 2 slot, 12.9% HP is no joke, especially she's a bruiser, so you'll most likely be running her, if you're using an RTA, most likely be running her with some decently bruisery type of heroes, i.e. Landy, Ravi, Last Rider Crow, Ambitious Tywin, anything. You name all the name all the bruisers and knights, that imprint release will be very, very helpful. If on the other hand you want to use her as her own like standalone DPS, she's got 16.8% self imprint concentration, which is absolutely insane. One of Alencia's toughest stat to gain is honestly that balance between crit rate and then having usable tanky stats with speed, with crit damage. But having the 16 itself is absolutely, you know, it's good. It's good. It's like the best imprint concentration that she can possibly have. She already has a really high base HP and high base defense, with which both will benefit her based on her kit. So again, in terms of a desirable pullable hero, right now she's definitely topping the charts. I would say, like, even before I continue on her skill set, is that heroes like ML Luluka, beyond the, you know, snipe out the Arby's, ML Luluka brings a lot to the table. Remnant Violet, Last Rider Crow, they all brought a lot to the table. They all dealt with their own sort of kind of like niche counters and stuff, but they also worked really well as a standalone hero. I do think Designer Lilibet has that potential, because based on the data mine, her damage potential is actually up there. So that gives her more or less more positivity on her initial thoughts than I did for Ambitious Tywin when he was initially released. Alright, so that being said, let's move on. First things first is skill 2. I think this is a passive skill as they introduced it into the in the video. As usual, these screenshots are taken straight from their video, so credit to of course Epic 7 and the team that developed these slides, or video slides. So first things first, when enemy's turns ends, gains 5 fighting spirit for each debuff inflicted on an ally. Alright, so it's combined. It could be okay, I'll continue first. Starts the battle with 30 fighting spirits. The 30 is orange, so if you skill enhance it, it changes the orange number. So at plus 5, you gain another 20. So it's 50 fighting spirit at the start of the battle. Okay, so when the caster's fighting spirit is full at the end of somebody's turn, consumes all fighting spirit to dispel all debuffs from the caster and increase combat readiness by 40%. So if we're talking about a straight up, you know, open battle, first turn, like I said, 40%, 180 speed, you'll be able to cut 300. So just keep that in mind. So that's pretty important. So you can maybe not rely on speed set. A lot of people thinking about counter set, and some people talking about lifesteal set. I think a lifesteal set might be a very interesting one as well. But let's move on. So how this works is that you know, ideally it's 5 fighting spirit per debuff. You start at 50, so technically you need 10. You need 10 total debuffs in order for her to self cleanse on the first turn. Now in the video here, she was on a counter set. She countered F10 and gained 25 fighting spirit, which is the S1. So if you're looking for an opening cleanser, she's not gonna be a reliable one. So I'm just gonna tell you that she's not gonna be a reliable one. But does that mean she's bad? Absolutely not. It does not mean she's bad. It just means that if your thought is that I'm gonna take her into the predominant Cerise F10 RB Guild War defense, your luck's run out, because they're not really realistically gonna give you enough debuffs. Also, you have to keep in mind resistance check. In the video that they showed here, all 3, so DN, Specialty Change Doors, and Mort resisted Cerise. They fully resisted, so no debuffs landed. So for Lilibet in their video, to shake off the debuffs, she had to counter in order to get the fighting spirit at the end of F10's turn, because counter doesn't count as Lilibet's turn, it still counts as F10's turn, but she gained the fighting spirit at the end of F10's turn, so she cleanses. She's not an Ambitious Tywin, so to speak, but she's a lot better than Ambitious Tywin when he was first released. Because remember, Ambitious Tywin's original design was that if he doesn't get debuffed, which is my original thoughts video for him a long time ago now, I was like, if he doesn't get debuffed, if he resists, even if you don't put on immunity, we all know Champion Zerato resists debuffs all the time, while like your Soul Weavers with like, I don't know, 250 effect resist gets debuffed. Champion Zerato gets, you know, resist. that RNG can happen to Lilibet if you're gonna use her as a first turn cleanser, which is why I think that, you know, the more I think about it, it's just like, no, that's not her role. That's not her role. Her role is to deal with debuffs over time and have a cutting edge. The cutting part is actually not pun not intended, but it does work for her. Have a cutting edge over your opponent, but it's RNG, right? It's RNG. So it in a way, I would more compare her to someone like an F Maya. Given enough debuffs or given enough turns or enough hits, she will be able to shake it off and become very, very lethal. So not like an Ambitious Tywin, not like a Kitty Clarissa. It's way too much RNG. So I highly wouldn't recommend you go with the counter set one, because you're always going to be running that 20% RNG and with the resistance. So even if they do not debuff you enough and you still counter, you still might not get the fighting spirit to cleanse, or to cleanse yourself, and then therefore to cleanse your team. So that's where I think that's a kind of her flaw. But does that make her bad? I don't think so. We'll talk about the damage mods in a bit, because the damage mods I think is what saves her, if I understood the damage mods correctly. S3 decreases debuff duration of all allies by 2 turns, so the debuff duration 2 turns, and gets on stage to attack all enemies, increasing their skill cooldown for 1 turn. Damage dealt increases proportional to the caster's defense, and acquires 50 fighting spirit. So S3 is a cooldown skill, so you're able to hold this skill. You don't have to. You can choose not to cleanse we'll say cleanse, but it's a debuff duration. We just have to remember that, like, if Dizzy does the S2 and extends the duration of the debuffs, she will only be able to remove 2 turns off the debuff. So 3 turns will become, you still have 1 left, right? So just keep that in mind. I think that's very, very important. But the skill cooldown is -1 at the +3. It's 30% raw damage, just like Alencia, or anyone really now. Most people's raw damage is 30%, 4 turn cooldown. So unless they keep debuffing you and you get the 40% CR boost, just keep in mind on your speed. So maybe keeping her slow is not that good if you're gonna, you know, somehow use this to your advantage. You can hold the S3, which is good as well, so that potentially if they have immunity and you want to increase their skill cooldown, you can choose when to do it, but then that will require maybe some effectiveness, depends on the opponent you fight again. But it's just all over the place in terms of, like, yeah, I think it's going to be useful. In the video she does this, and Tempest Turn skill cooldown by 1 turn, but so yeah, she doesn't S3 right away, Tempest Turn, in the video. Damage dealt increases proportional to the caster's defense, and like I said, it acquires 50 fighting spirit. So she'll be able to turn cycle that S2 quite a bit, especially if you add the S3 in it. But then after that, she's got to wait a bit. This is the part of the S3 animation. In terms of character design, I think she's pretty cute. I like her more than the green Lilibet design. The green Lilibet design, especially the uncensored design, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, I think you can look it up yourself. I'm not gonna show anything. But the uncensored design is way more like Monka-esque. This is like, you know, it's kind of cute, it's kind of sexy, it's nice. And no, Jagan is not a lolicon. Nice try. Design a Lilibet skill 1. So with a +3, you get a 10% effect chance, up to 75% chance to silence for 1 turn. Again, people thinking counter set. I think I'm siding on the lifesteal set. If you're not going speed set, I'm siding on the lifesteal set. I think the lifesteal set has some potential, especially being defense scaling bruiser. Lifesteal has more benefit because lifesteal always works better with the effective HP having higher defense than the HP, if you can maintain the EHP. And then yeah, for 1 turn, damage dealt also increases the caster's defense. If you soul burn it, which is 10 souls, increase the effect chance to 100%. I mean, on a turn that you really need it, I can foresee it in an RTA fight. It can make or break a fight, I think, if you can get the silence to 100%, and you bypass the resistance check, that silence can be crippling for your opponent, so I can see that definitely be usable. 30% raw damage, like I said. We do have the data mine up, although the data miner, I gotta give the credit, what's his name again? Eufine Throwaway. Thank you for the data mine. He notes that the S1, he's kind of confused on it. I think if I'm reading this correctly, and we look at compared to like F Maya's scaling, it looks to be 100% of self-defense scale on the S1. All right, the attack rate is at 0.6. Okay, so the S1, 100% increased damage from the defense, 100% defense scale, 100%, and then attack rate is 0.6. Okay, and then the S3, which we talked about here, is 115%. Okay, 115% self-defense and a 0.6 attack rate as well. But this is AoE. Okay, compared to F Maya, something like F Maya is at 75% self-defense on the S1, which we already know is that hits like a truck. But the S3 is 150% self-defense. This isn't even the 30% HP thing. It's 150% self-defense on the S3. It's just, it can one-shot, you know, speed RBs from a standstill, full HP. F Maya's S3, that is. A proper bruiser F Maya, like 280 crit damage, 2000 defense. We're not even talking about super high. From a standstill maximal S3, you'll be able to one-shot. So if the data mine is correct, if my understanding is correct, it's 100% self-scaling on the S1 and 115% self-scaling on the S3, and F Maya is 150 and 75. Just keep those things in mind. The S3 on F Maya, the attack rate is at a 1x mod though, but the S1 is at a 0.5. So the S1, again, this is based on like if the comparison of comparing both data mods, damage mods are correct, then designer Lilibet's S1 hits really hard. It hits really hard. That's where I think it can save her. As confusing as I think the use of her skills become, like, because like, you know, there's a lot of dependency on whether or not they use a lot of debuffs. If you build her with your thought as like, I'm gonna use her as a, you know, as a DPS, defense scaling bruiser, I think she's gonna be very solid. So she'll be basically a defense scaling bruiser that can deal with debuffs over time. She can cleanse, quote unquote, cleanse your teammates. She can silence S1. She can increase the skill cooldown. She can do AoE. And she can CR boost if enough debuffs, or we shouldn't even say enough debuffs. It's the amount of fighting spirit, right? So keep that in mind. It's the fighting spirit that gives her the CR boost. It's not the amount of debuffs. The debuffs just the debuffs speed up the CR boost or speed up the fighting spirit. But she gets fighting spirit from the S1. She gets fighting spirit from the S3. She gets fighting spirit from debuffed allies, herself included. So 40% combat readiness. So I think overall she has a lot to offer, especially if you're into bruiser play. She'll be hard to kill. Based if my damage mod reading is correct, she'll do a lot of damage. If she has on lifesteal, she'll be even more pain to kill. And then she can shake off debuffs, right? So overall, I think that she's a good ML hero. I just didn't like that her entrance came at a time where crowd control was so predominant that it almost feels just like a kind of like a, you okay, all right guys, you're done pulling your crowd control heroes, now time to pull her. But if you take that thought out in terms of like, she's not gonna be your opening cleanser, she'll be a hero that you want to have sustain over time. She'll be a solid choice. The question would be, I guess, am I gonna pull for her? Upon my own analysis, as you guys heard, my whole like, you know, beans spilled, I think if I can look past her beyond like, you know, she's gonna be good for crowd control, and just look at her as like kind of like an F Maya hybrid, I think I'm gonna pull for her. I think she's actually incredibly solid. So that's my thoughts. She's definitely not giving me the hype vibes as I did for Remnant Violet. Oh, you must pull for him. Or ML Crow. Oh, you must pull for him. But I think she's gonna stand the test of time. I actually don't foresee her needing a buff. Her kit is not as confusing as Ambitious Tywin, like I said, on Ambitious Tywin's initial release. But even if she does get a buff, I don't even know how they're gonna really buff her. I think she's solid all around. But definitely not one of those, I think, gems that people see right away that she's gonna be very, very good. But like I said, if your expectation is that you're gonna beat those Cerise and F10 comps in Guild War, she's not the answer. You have other answers for that, but she's not going to be. I don't foresee that to be the case. Regardless, anyways, that's my thoughts on ML Lilibet. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I'm gonna end this for the video recording. If you guys have Discord, check out the Discord server. Follow me on Twitter, subscribe to YouTube if you haven't. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time.